you. Good afternoon to all participants and good morning to the Honorable Resource Person, Mr. Ronny Heintze in Germany. Also, the Honorable Head of the Institution of Education, Development and Quality Assurance, LPPMP of Universitas 11 Maret, Professor Sarwiji Suwandi, and all the head of study programs in Universitas 11 Maret, as well as the accreditation task forces of the study programs. Welcome to this workshop session on writing the self-evaluation report, SER of AQAS International Accreditation. I would like to thank you all for participating in this event. My name is Erna Kusumawati, and I am delighted to be here moderating the session, which may help the study programs in writing the self-evaluation report and preparing all the appendixes needed for the accreditation process. Our today resource person is Mr. Ronny Heintze. He is a senior consultant and also a commissioner of international affairs at the Agency for Quality Assurance through Accreditation of Study Programs, or we already knew as AQAS. Welcome, and we are very pleased to have you here. Before we start the session, Professor Sarwiji would like to deliver his speech addressed to all participants. Professor Sarwiji, I will hand over the forum to you, please.
Thank you, Mbak Erna. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat sore, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Hello, Pak Ronny. Good morning. Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, pertama-tama marilah kita panjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah SWT yang senantiasa melimpahi kita begitu banyak rahmat dan kenikmatan, dan alhamdulillah pada kesempatan sore hari ini dan pagi waktu Jerman kita bisa melaksanakan kegiatan workshop penyusunan self-evaluation report SER untuk persiapan akreditasi AQAS. Yang saya hormati Sekretaris LPPMP, Kepala Pusat Pengembangan Sistem Manajemen Mutu belum bergabung, Mbak Indah, Korbit S.T Internasional, Bu Dr. Erna Dyah Kusumawati, M.Hum, LL.M, dan Ibu Dr. Indah Widyastuti, Sarjana Teknik Magister Engineering, Pak Erwan, Ph.D, Direktur Kerjasama Pengembangan dan Internasionalisasi, Bapak Ibu Kepala Program Studi dan tim AQAS. Ini ada 11 program studi yang nanti kita siapkan untuk akreditasi internasional AQAS. Terima kasih Bapak Ibu sudah menyempatkan waktu untuk hadir dalam kegiatan workshop ini. Tentu kami mengucapkan terima kasih yang tak terhingga kepada Bapak Ibu yang senantiasa berkomitmen dalam rangka pemenuhan apa yang ditargetkan oleh universitas kita. Ini bagian dari indikator kinerja utama kita yang 15 program studi terakreditasi internasional di tahun ini. Thank you Pak Ronny for joining us. We really hope to get information and alignments from you to prepare international accreditation by AQAS. Especially how to prepare a good document. Dan saya berharap nanti Bapak Ibu bisa mengikuti kegiatan ini secara baik dan akan dipandu oleh Ibu Erna untuk bisa menggali informasi sebanyak-banyaknya supaya harapan kita bisa menyiapkan khususnya di penyiapan laporan evaluasi diri dengan sebaik-baiknya, sehingga kita nanti harapkan ini rencananya untuk submit bulan menapa nggih Mbak Erna? November nggih.
Iya, sekitar itu Prof. Tapi
Juni Prof.
Juni.
Oh, Juni nggih.
Tapi ada ini juga Prof, ada yang sebetulnya ditarget untuk FIBA, tapi kemudian karena FIBA belum ada respon, kemudian kita coba untuk
gitu.
kenalkan
Nggih,
dengan
geser
AQAS
ke
beberapa.
AQAS. Nggih. Bapak Ibu sekali lagi saya ucapkan terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan apa yang kita kerjakan hari ini memberikan kemanfaatan yang optimal bagi kita semua dalam rangka penyiapan dokumen AQAS dengan sebaik-baiknya. Saya kira itu, dan kalau ada kekurangan dari kegiatan ini tentu saya mohon maaf yang sebesar-besarnya atas nama lembaga. Sepenuhnya nanti kami serahkan waktunya kepada Mbak Erna dan Mbak Indah untuk bisa memoderatori kegiatan ini sampai tuntas. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much, Prof. Sarwiji, for such a wonderful message. Hopefully we can fulfill our task to prepare the documents with the best that we can, so that all of us, the study programs here, can receive an accreditation from AQAS International. What will happen next is that Mr. Heintze will deliver his presentation relating to AQAS self-evaluation report. However, before we proceed, let me do just a little bit of housekeeping here. First of all, I think all participants are aware to please put your microphone muted all the time. Also, I would like to remind the participants to prepare some questions or remarks to Mr. Heintze relating to the SER, self-evaluation report. There will be two possibilities in asking questions or giving remarks. Participants can type their questions in the chat section, and I will read the questions on their behalf. In addition, we will have the opportunity to open the floor for everyone who wishes to speak directly to Mr. Ronny. For this purpose, please use the raise hand button if you wish to speak directly. If time allows, we will provide some time for this direct participation. If you want to use the chat box, please type concisely when delivering your questions, and also mention your name as well as your study program. And for those who prefer to ask or to speak in Bahasa Indonesia, you can also do so. Please write in the chat box, and we will try our best to accommodate and translate your questions into English so that Pak Ronny will understand. As you aware that all parts of these workshops will be recorded for the documentation purposes. So without further ado, we will begin with Mr. Heintze's presentation. Mr. Heintze will have half an hour. I hope that will be sufficient time to present your SER. And after that will be followed directly by the Q&A session. As the moderator, I will keep on track on the time. Therefore, I will provide a reminder to Pak Ronny at 5 minutes before your time is up. And I hope such reminder will not cause any inconvenience in your presentation. So, Mr. Heintze, I hand over the forum to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much for this great introduction. Thank you for having me, for inviting me, and for starting this session, for Professor Sarwiji and for Erna for moderating. Welcome to this afternoon session. My name is Ronny Heintze. I work for the German accreditation agency AQAS, which is the largest accreditation agency in Germany, and the agency who you choose to have a start for an international accreditation procedure. I have half an hour for large of a topic. So what I will do is I will try to focus very, very precisely, and let's see if the screen share works. Are you able to see the screen? Do you?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Wonderful. So we will basically have. No, I don't see anything. Do you still see me? Okay, let's keep it this. Do you still see? I'm sorry, I have a small technical issue. Now we're back. Okay, perfect. Then let's keep it this way. Since we only have half an hour, I will be very short on number 1 and number 2 of the slides, because this is a little bit of the understanding the procedure and understanding who we are, because who we as AQAS are, of course, also shapes the way that we process our international accreditation procedures. I'll be very, very short on this, and I will give a very short introduction on the procedure, but then talk a bit more about the criteria, which are very important for understanding what is expected to draft a good self-evaluation report, which is exactly what lies ahead next. So a quick intro. AQAS itself, we are almost 20 years, so we will have our 20th anniversary next year, and we are a membership organization by higher education institutions. And that means we do not act on behalf of a government. We do not act on behalf of any industry. We have a background in higher education, and our understanding is that higher education itself is a good guarantor for quality, and that quality needs to come from the institutions itself. We operate on a non-profit basis. And in the past 19 and a half years, we have accredited more than 7,000 programs, mainly in Germany, but with a growing demand also abroad. And we are not field specific. That basically means that our methodology is fit for use for all the different kinds of academic disciplines. So we work in sciences, we work in the humanities, we work in arts, we work in engineering. So that is all covered, because our methodology is rather on the flexible side. And of course, for all the relevant European networks and authorities, they do recognize our work. We are members in ENQA. Our general manager, Doris, she was just elected to the board of ENQA last week. And we're also listed in ECAR, which is the key, which is the white list of European agencies. So how does an accreditation procedure with AQAS look like? And this basically helps us figuring out where we are. We're now in the top left corner, which is the application writing process. This is the beginning, and this is what we're targeting today. That means that once this application is done, this is the self-evaluation process, you will deliver the first draft of that document to us, and you will receive an informal feedback, basically saying the report will be scrutinized, and we will check, is it complete? Is everything there? Is there anything that is basically hard to understand? Is it maybe better to add a couple of more annexes or to restructure things? That's an informal feedback. And once the documents are generally good to go, we will forward this to the AQAS Accreditation Commission. And that is the moment when the final decision-making body of AQAS, which is the commission, has a first look on your application. And this is a body of academics. So you have professors there, 16 from all the different disciplines. You have students, you have representatives from the labor market there. So all the stakeholders, they have a first look on the application. But all they do is that application good to go and good to be delivered to the experts for the review? So do we believe that generally this application can succeed? If that is the case, there is the official initialization of the procedure, and you will also receive a letter for that, because this is the first really official step in the procedure. It's very possible that the Commission provides some additional feedback to the self-evaluation report. That could be that based on the understanding of the Commission, they encourage the experts to particularly look at the one point or the other, or in light of one of the criteria, give some explanations and expect particular aspects to be discussed by the experts. That is something that the Commission will also share with you in their official initialization letter. So you can see if the points that the Commission wants to be particularly discussed based on your application are well reflected in the report. At this moment, then also there is the nomination of experts. That basically means that the expert panel, who will be particularly and specifically tasked with reviewing the programs that are part of our procedure, they will be nominated. That is a mix of professors, of a representative of the labor market, and also a student member, and at least one of the panel members will have experience in the Indonesian higher education system, so that some context is also known in the panel. The experts will receive all your documentations, and in the first step, what will happen is the experts will give a first and very individual statement in writing, only based on paper. And that is very good, because that provides the first impression that experts have. We will distribute that amongst the experts, but we will also share that with you, so you get a very fresh impression of what is the first initial expert's opinion. Basically, that helps us point out what might be areas of discussion for the site visit. What are potential areas where experts do see strengths of your program? Where do they not understand something? And where do they already ahead of time believe that maybe that could be an issue that could be discussed in terms of further enhancement needed? That will happen already before we come for the site visit. And this is then the happening, the key event. It's the site visit when the experts come. They visit the program, they visit the campus, and then they talk with the management of the university. They talk with the teaching staff, the leadership of the programs. They also talk with the students, and they also talk with labor market representatives. We will very carefully plan that site visit. Once it's time for that, once the self-evaluation report is written, we look for a date that fits you, we look for a date that fits the experts, and we will plan that together. At this point in time, we are not running physical site visits. We're doing everything virtual because the pandemic does not allow otherwise. That has some pros, that has some cons. And it will basically depend on the further development of the situation outside. If we can plan a physical site visit, which usually is the much better option, particularly if none of the AQAS experts have ever set foot at the university yet. So it's a little bit of a black box. The good thing is we have protocols for all of the cases that might occur. And we will discuss that individually once we're closer to date to see what is possible and what is the best option for you, for the programs, but also for the experts to make it work. Once the site visit is over, the experts will write a report. This is then when you can lean back a little bit. The task is totally with the experts, and they will make the assessment on all the criteria for each program that we review individually. Then this report is first shared with you, and so you can comment on it, basically saying, is there any wrong facts? Is there any malrepresentation of facts that then lead to conclusions that might be inappropriate? So you can fact check it and you can comment on the report, and then the report of the experts together with your comment is shared with the Accreditation Commission of AQAS, and they will take the final decision. That is all the process, and depending on the decision, there is a follow-up or there is no follow-up, but that is probably the next. We're 10 minutes in it, so I have 1/3 of the time already taken, and I will probably talk about
Ronny.
Yes,
if you
please.
wish, you can also continue until 4. So we still have more or less 1 hour for question and answer. It's also fine. Just
Yeah, that is. I think it's a very good approach that I do, because I think the question and answer is the most important part, because that I deliver some input, gives the rough estimate, and then we can spend some more time in question and answer, because that is usually more helpful, because then we discuss particularly what is of importance to you.
Okay, great. Yes. So it's up to you. You can also use like 30 minutes, as I said before, or you can continue until 4 o'clock.
We'll see. We'll see. So
Okay,
the decision, I think this is very important to know in advance. AQAS will not implement a yes/no decision. We have 4 different decision options. First of it is the unconditional decision. That is this is the best possible outcome. It basically means all standards are fulfilled. There might be some recommendations where the experts believe there is room for further improvement, but the standards are all fully fulfilled. There is no need for adjustments. The second option happens in rather 70-75% of the cases, is a conditional accreditation. It's a positive decision that comes into force right away, so it's a valid accreditation. However, the experts believe that there are certain shortcomings that have relevance to the standards, and then they define to which extent a certain standard is not yet fulfilled, and that becomes a condition, and that basically means you will have to work on that, and you will have to go back within no more than 12 months. We will take the documents of the follow-up back to the experts, and they will have to assess, is the standard now fulfilled with the improvements that you have implemented? So that is the second option, that is conditional accreditation. In case the situation is not as good as we would all wish it would be, and we cannot take a positive decision at that point, we still have an option to avoid a negative decision, and that is we don't take a decision at all, we postpone a decision. And that basically means we will share with you the findings of the experts, where they define what are shortcomings in terms of the standards, and give you up to 1.5 years to work on the shortcomings, and to prove and to implement enhancement measures to meet the standards. And only then we will look at it again and take a decision. That is a very good way in case problems that occur during the procedure seem to be bigger, or they are interrelated. So if sometimes there are parts of the curriculum which require an update that might link to stuff that needs an update. So that is the postponement. It happens in about 10% of the cases. And of course, there is the option of a denial of accreditation, which is the negative, the most negative outcome. The good thing is any denial or any postponement never happen as a surprise. For very sure, and I'm with AQAS now for 11 years, there has never been a denial that was not clearly visible before, where all the feedbacks loop did not indicate we do have severe problems. So that does not come as a surprise, and that's basically also the same for the postponement. So what are we looking at? What are the criteria? And that brings us to the task of writing the self-evaluation report, because this is a little bit the task that is ahead of you. Let's start with a quick look at the general picture. What are the criteria we look at? We look at 7 criteria, and for sure, in a first accreditation that we do together, a key aspect is, of course, criteria number 1, which is the quality of the curriculum. So that is probably what we will discuss in detail. We'll for that reason need all the course descriptions. We will need to understand what are the learning outcomes on the level of the program, and what are the learning outcomes on the level of the courses, and how do they interrelate, and how does the course setup assure that all the learning outcomes are achieved. We of course also look for the procedures for quality assurance. So that basically asks the question of, how do you know that what you do really fulfills the aims that you have set? So how is your internal assurance? How are stakeholders involved? The good thing is we do a program accreditation procedure. So we are not so much interested in the overall big picture of all the policies. What matters to us is that you can present evidence that it works on the level of the program. So we really want to figure out is like, what were the implemented changes that come out of your internal quality assurance? What was the feedback of the students, and how did that lead to an improvement? What was the feedback of the stakeholders, and how did that lead to an improvement? And since we talk about the program specifically, we really want to see what is the level of application in the program, and how did that impact the program. So on the program level, we assume that you have policies for all that, but what we're interested in is to see the evidence for the impact of these policies and for the implementation. We also look at learning, teaching, and assessment of students. That basically means it's like, how is the teaching process, different forms of teaching? How does assessment method meet the learning outcomes? So is the assessment method that you choose, is that fit to be able to assess the outcome that you have defined? Let me give you a very typical example where usually that you would see a problem. If, for example, your learning outcome targets the implementation of group work activities, and the assessment method for that is that you have a written exam about the theories of teamwork, maybe that is an issue where you can where the assessment method and the intended learning outcome does not always match. So the whole aspect of learning, teaching, and assessment, what you can see is and understand is student-centered learning. I think that is the background of that's very important criteria. Number 4, here we usually deal a little bit more with the formality, admission, progression, recognition, and certification. So what are the regulations for admission for each of the program? How do you monitor progression? What are your, and that's very interesting, what are your recognition procedures? So that basically is focused on facilitation of mobility. How do you recognize outcomes of incoming students, but how do you also facilitate the recognition for students who go out? And of course, certification was the final outcome. Teaching staff is a very clear standard. Here we basically want to see the qualitative and the quantitative level of your teaching staff that is involved. So do you have the right number of teaching staff, and do you have the qualified teaching staff? That usually is you have a table of staff involved. You have an annex with the academic short CVs of the staff. That is the focus here. But we also look a little bit of how do you help and assist to further qualify your teaching staff. So how do you make sure that the quality of staff stays up to date? Learning resources and student support, that's where we see like what are the facilities, but also what are the support mechanisms. So what is on the non-academic level? Like how do you support students in specific situations in their life? Do you have students who work at the same time? Do you have consultancy and advisory offers available for students who like all the different things that fell sick, need a break in the study and then come back? So all the things that might happen in student life. And number 7 is public information. So how do you inform the public about the information of your program? Since we do not look at one program only in the procedure, the structure of the self-evaluation report, of course, is of utmost importance. And that basically means we need to define and we need to make a wise decision on which part of the SER, of the application of the self-evaluation will be jointly for all the programs that we look at, because they basically are based on common structures and which are individual. And the structure of the SER, and we have already shared with you the general guidelines for drafting a self-evaluation report. The structure of the SER, of course, follows exactly the same structure as we have in the criteria. So at the very first, I mean, we have a couple of cover sheets that ask for very specific information, like what is the extent of the program, what's the number of students, when did the program start. That basically sets the scene of the facts, hard facts about the program. And then, of course, it is very important to understand a little bit the context of the programs, and that is, how are the programs that we're reviewing embedded in the university, in the faculty? Are the programs that we look at small island programs that are a very small niche for the university, or are these large programs that are that have a certain strategic priorities also for the university or for the faculty? That's important for the experts to understand, of course, and how do they fit into. And then you will see, and that's the recommendation, is you work with it standard by standard, not program by program, but standard by standard. And where needed, you have sub-chapters for the different programs that you're reviewing. And for sure, in the field of the quality of the curriculum, we need sub-chapters for each program, because this is where we look for the intended learning outcomes, and they will be different from program to program. And the description of how does your curriculum lead to the achievement of these outcomes. This is probably for sure where we need independent sub-chapters. The processes for quality assurance, usually you would find that the general part can be shared amongst all of these. Of course, when you talk about the specifics of what was implemented in the one program, what was implemented in the other program, I would encourage like to have small sub-chapters there as well, but probably you have a general approach of how is evaluation done, how is student feedback implemented. You might use structures of the faculty, you might have offices for that in the faculty level, and that can then of course all be explained together. Learning, teaching, and assessment usually is a common chapter, because you will implement comparable forms of teaching, you will implement comparable approaches to assessment, and how do you assure that? So that is probably something that is shared amongst the program. Admission, that really depends on the specifics of the program. If you have very specific and different admission procedures for each program, or is it a general admission that you follow and then students just go into different programs? So there is a little bit of flexibility. Teaching staff, that is the same. You will have different staff involved in different programs. If there is large overlap, you can have that a joint chapter, and you explain who is teaching in which program in a table. But if generally you say no, in the programs that we review, that there is different teaching staff, then I would encourage do like 3 different sub-chapters. And number 7 and number 8 in the criteria, usually this is very well dealt with on a general level, which then can be combined in one chapter. Public information usually is rather on the short side, because everything that we really need there is something that should be publicly available, so that experts can assess it. So it usually contains a couple of links, but it also deals with the question of how do you inform stakeholders. So how is do you have particular information for the labor market representatives? Do you have exchange mechanisms that maybe you did not reflect on in the background of the quality assurance, where you of course also work with stakeholders, but where you more or less inform the public and where you more or less inform them, and what are your measures? I have a couple of minutes left. So I think the core, one of the key things that we look at is the quality of the curriculum. So let's spend a couple of minutes discussing what you would want to represent in your self-assessment report here. And there you can see, you can identify 3 larger areas, and that is the level of the intended learning outcomes. The key is here, what are your defined and published learning outcomes on the level of the program. So that is the key, to have them defined, to have them available. So because this is basically we will use this to assess the whole quality of the curriculum, to see does your curriculum allow and enable the achievement of these intended learning outcomes. And the second aspect, when you look at the learning outcomes on program level, is we look at bachelor, we look at masters. So there are predefined levels in the qualification frameworks, and your learning outcomes on the level of the program will have to meet these qualification levels, and that is something that the experts will assess. And of course, to do that, you have to document that. And on the second level, you have the courses, and we do assume that all courses work with learning outcomes as well. So indeed, the content of the courses is important, but even more important is the definition of outcomes of the courses, because we do take a fully outcome-oriented approach in the accreditation procedure. So when you then explain the curriculum design, so how is the progression within the curriculum? So do the courses build on each other? And there is a certain didactic approach where you say, you start with very general courses in the beginning, and then you allow more specific approaches, which would be a very common structure. Sometimes you also have requirements, so you have required courses for the whole university that come from the whole academic system. So all the students would have to undergo certain language courses, certain history courses, certain culture courses, and they sometimes are very much in the beginning. So that is something that needs to be explained, because the experts need to understand that. What is the ratio from compulsory versus elective elements, and why is it that way? Do you have only compulsory courses and students have no choice? Or do you have an approach that basically focuses on very strongly elective courses that give lots of liberty to the students? And very important, and sometimes a bit challenging, is the question on workload. Because different systems use different credit systems. And that is perfectly fine. The AQAS methodology allows flexibility on that end, and respects the fact that you use your own national credit hour, credit point system. The question that we at the same time have is, how does your credit system relate to the ECTS? So how does that relate to the European credit transfer system? And that is built on student workload. So and what sometimes is a bit challenging is like, what is your expectation towards your students? How many hours should they work for a specific course? And that does not mean only the hours in class, because you expect students to prepare ahead of your courses. Then they have certain tasks that they have to do at home. What is your expectation? How many hours do your students have to invest? Because then that helps you link it to ECTS. So far in Indonesia, I have not seen that as a big problem. What is a very interesting point to sometimes discuss and discover as part of this exercise is that you recognize that the different teachers, the different professors involved in the teaching, they all have certain expectations that lead to the fact that in the second semester, students have to work 3 or 4 times the amount of what professors expect them to work in the fourth semester. because everybody deals with what is the course load and what is this time that students spend in the courses. But then there is all the additional readings and the additional extra work, and sometimes you discover peaks if you consider student work out there. And that's the reason why we do that whole exercise. And of course, then to assess that, we need the course descriptions. So the course handbook, where you should indicate what type of course is it? Is it a lecture? Is it a more interactive seminar? What are the learning outcomes, the methods, and the assessment methods? Very important. I said that to the standard of learning, teaching, and assessment. So there is the clear link from the quality of the curriculum to the assessment. So how do you assess in your courses? And what are typical annexes that we would see? We would see the typical study plan as an annex here. So what is the course plan per semester, and what are the course handbooks and the course descriptions that would be an annex. So that is one more. And since I only took 2 minutes more than I planned to do, let me move on to what is probably also very important when it comes to exactly the based on experience. Sometimes this is a point where universities struggle. This is the link what I was talking about: learning, teaching, and assessment of students. And here, of course, we look at the different methods that you have for teaching and learning. And the key is here student-centered approaches. Like, is your curriculum one size fits all, or do you respect a certain diversity in students? From all the things that I have learned about the Indonesian higher education system, many other systems could learn a little bit about how to deal with diversity and how to appreciate different student backgrounds from the Indonesian system. So that is something that, however, we would want to see demonstrated here, like how is it student-centered? Of course, this is what we see here, is for the organization and the feasibility of studies. There, of course, you will have data if the programs are already running. A good way to present that there is feasibility and that the program can be done in the number of semesters that you have predefined is you have numbers of like what is the percentage of students that graduate on time? What is the percentage of students that graduate on one semester later than what is the study plan? There we really have the good data, or we would expect you to have the good data, but also, and that is the other part, the student workload assessment. Like when you plan, this is the number of hours that you expect a student to invest in a certain time for a certain course. How do you know that this is true? Like, is that what you generally assume, or have you ever collected any feedback of students on how much time do they truly invest? So just to see, is what you plan and what students do, does that match? Is that realistic? And again, there is nothing bad if you find out students work less, if you find out students work more. The question is, what do you learn from that? If you have an evaluation and the outcome is different from what you expect, that is nothing that is necessarily bad. The question is always, what do you learn from that? If you have a plan and then you figure out the reality is different, the question that we ask is, what do you learn from that? What are the consequences that you took? So that is usually something we do not expect. We, and particularly the experts, do not expect that everything works perfectly smooth, because the experts that we bring to assess the programs, they are professors themselves, and they know that in academia, and if you have a plan and in the teaching and learning process, sometimes things work a little bit different than what you have thought. So they're used to that. And if they discover that your representation is paradise and everything works perfect at your university, probably they will find it very suspicious, or they will all want to move to your university if everything works perfectly in your university. So that would generally be the two points that I would like to focus before we enter question and answers, because this is something that we usually see as a little bit more challenging, because the European way to look at things, particularly at student workload and assessment, can be a little bit different than if you work with a national framework, and so I wanted to focus on that. But I'm very sure, and I do invite questions at this time for all the other aspects as well that I have just touched upon very shortly. I could not follow the chat at the same time, but I'm very sure that Erna was doing that. But you're also encouraged to raise your hand and have a question directly. The more questions we have, the better it is, because I'm here just to support you as much as possible in that process, in that very important first step where the task of writing the self-evaluation report is with you. And now I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Pak Ronny, for such a clear and concise explanation. I do apologize that we do not have enough time to explain everything, but I think in the question and answer, we're going to explore more detail for the criteria in the AQAS self-evaluation report. Maybe just a bit of information that we currently preparing for the 5 study programs to submit this year around June 2021. So these 5 study programs already reached into the criteria 3 and 4, but we're not sure whether what we have filled in the criteria is already the one that AQAS wanted or not. Therefore, we decided to have this session so that we can discuss basically maybe everything in the self-evaluation report. I already saw the questions from Putri Mulyaningsih. I can read it for you, Pak Ronny. Please explain, Putri Mulyaningsih asked 3 questions. The first one is, please explain the European qualification framework and the European Accreditation System, or ECTS. Second questions regarding the criteria 1.8, I think she might be referred to the ESG, I guess. Regarding to the criteria 1.8, please advise what does these questions ask about, which parts of the curriculum are offered exclusively the study program to be accredited, and which are also offered in other study programs. Third questions, please advise regarding criteria 1.11 on the process how the module or course handbook is regularly updated. I think maybe you would like to answer that first, and then we'll move on to the second questions.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think these are questions that are very much relevant because that is very important. So I'll start from 3, 2, 1 because probably number 1 is a question where we could have an extra seminar, because we're talking qualification frameworks and the ECTS is very large. So on the process of course handbook updates. So we do believe that academia is an open process, and that also programs usually are frequently updated in very small aspects. So that you might have courses that remain the same for a longer time because they're basic, but when you look at the more applied ones, the more specific ones, there could be updates. And the question that we would like to have answered is, when you do updates to your course descriptions, what is that process like? How is that done? Like, who is in charge of it? So if you are a lecturer, for example, if you are a professor and you believe, I think I need to update something in my course that is not just a tiny little thing, but it has an impact that requires an update of my course description, how is that process? Can every lecturer, can every professor do that and go ahead? Or is there a process of coordinating that? Like, because in the end, you have to achieve a certain learning outcome on the program level. And how is that update, that frequently update process steered? It could very well be that you say, we only do that every 2 years, we only do that every year. Whatever your reality is, like, how is that process? If you basically want to update the course description, how is that designed? Regarding the criteria 1.8, which part of the curriculum, yeah, the exclusively or offered for other study programs. Study programs, particularly if cohorts are a bit larger, you might have courses that are not only used for one individual program. So, for example, you have if you have introduction to mathematics, I'm just taking something out of my head. If you have a big lecture, introduction to mathematics, it might very well be that this is a course that is relevant for more than one study program, because basically they all need that introduction to mathematics. And then you basically say, this is a course that one or from the faculty gives, but we have students from 3 different programs that take part in that course. Then this course would be one course that would be shared amongst different study programs and not exclusively used for that one program. So to which extent that is relevant in your faculty, you will probably know the answer better, because that really depends on how you use your resources. We have some programs that basically say, no, all the courses that we give are exclusive to our program, and we do not share any courses. That usually is very strongly dependent on the resources available, on the size of the cohorts. Sometimes we have very, very specific courses that then are, of course, exclusive to the program because they are a core part of the specification of that program, while the general courses can be shared and then cohorts are a bit larger there. I hope that explains a little bit of what could be the one or what could be the other. And the first question indeed is a very large one. The European Qualifications Framework and the European Credit System. And indeed, this is interrelated and this is linked. So ECTS, and I'll try to facilitate as much as possible. The ECTS is the idea that every hour of student workload, every hour that a student works, is credited with a certain amount of credits. And within the ECTS system, within the ECTS, 1 credit equals, depending on the different nations that we have, 25 to 30 hours of student workload. So if a student works for 30 hours, and that includes work at home and work in class, that equals 1 credit. And there is the link to the qualification framework. Once at least 180 credits are achieved, that equals a bachelor level. So that is so the ECTS is it's the workload approach and the idea that you gain credits, and you gain credits also in smaller units. So for a certain course, you gain 6 credits, and the benefit of having these 6 credits is that if halfway of your studies you decide to change the location and move to another university, you take the credits with you and you can continue your studies there. And that's why there is also the link to recognition. But this is the ECTS idea. To gain credits for the work that you have done in the individual courses, for the qualifications that you have achieved. And then the qualifications framework is the definition of certain levels that then leads to certain degrees, and there is descriptions of these levels. what are the descriptors of a certain level, which in our case, in higher education, is bachelor, is master, is PhD. And in the framework, in the qualifications framework, you would have certain levels that then are met by certain degrees that then typically feature certain aspects and descriptors. And what we do is we look at your description of learning outcomes on the level of the bachelor. Does that meet what is defined as a bachelor level in the qualification framework? And again, the benefit here is these qualification frameworks are very, very helpful for recognition, because the qualification that you provide has a certain level. And when you have different tables in different frameworks, you can see how is that level in your framework, what equals that level in another framework. And that is really helpful for the whole recognition of degrees. And that again brings the whole idea of mobility, not only of students, but also of graduates. That was not even in a nutshell, and probably a very interesting topic, because yeah, they are based on national qualification frameworks that of course have relevance for the different institutions. I hope that sheds some light. So if that is not the case and I missed the point, please add another question in the chat or raise your hand so I can be more specific, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Ronny. Maybe also a soft reminder for those who wants to or who wish to speak directly, please use the raise hand button so that I can see that you would like to speak directly. And then we move on to the second person to ask questions to you, Pak Ronny. Regarding with the accreditation decision for conditional accreditation and postponement, after the study program meet the requirement condition or doing the revision, there will be site visit again before the accreditation will become valid? Question from Businto Sunario.
Yes. Yes. So as explained, there are 4 options that are possible, and there is one of that is the conditional accreditation. In case of a conditional accreditation, it's very sure there is no additional site visit for sure, because it's very well defined what the adjustment needs to be. So the shortcoming, the finding is well defined, and the Commission will only give a condition when they believe this is something that can be dealt with in 12 months. And the documentation, you will provide additional documentation, but for sure there is no additional site visit. And the good thing is, in a conditional accreditation, the decision is a positive one already by the time the conditions are given. So this is a valid accreditation from the very beginning, even if it's still conditional, because we believe that the conditions can be met. If after 12 months the conditions are not met, we will withdraw that. So this is a little bit of the trust that we have in an institution. That's why we only will give conditional accreditation if we believe and we trust. I do quality assurance, so trust is a very, very particular term, but we only do provide a conditional accreditation if we trust that the university and that the faculty can implement the changes. The case of postponement looks a little bit different. Postponement means at this point we are sure, we do not know if we can trust enough, if we believe that there is the potential or the will, or sometimes the challenges can be rather complex. So we do not take a positive decision at this point, but we postpone. And then it really depends a little bit on what are the shortcomings. If the shortcomings are shortcomings that basically are linked to the facilities that you have on site, are linked to certain infrastructure, that might create the need of an additional site visit. However, this is extremely and extraordinarily rare. I think in all the 11 years, I've only seen that once, because at this point, we will usually what we do is we have another discussion round again. So we have virtual meetings, or we do a bit of exchange between the experts and the university. But we try to avoid an additional site visit whenever that is possible, and we usually find ways not to create the need for that. However, if the reason for the postponement can only be addressed with an additional site visit, at this point we do have that option. That is absolutely true. But I mean, in reality, it's a very rare case. But the process is much more of a complex, is a little bit more complex than in the fulfillment of the conditions. Because in the fulfillment of the conditions, we only look at the conditions. In the case of a postponement, we do know that sometimes there are interlinkages, and that basically means we can have a look at the bigger picture again, because we did not yet take a decision at all. So that is something that is important to highlight. So, what's next?
Yeah, next question. But before we move on to the next person, the following of the questions from Pusinto, if then a study program is, for example, given conditional accreditation, and how can we prove that the condition that you mentioned or you asked is fulfilled? Should we send again a SER report, or just mentioning the improvement that we made? And how long does it take, like for the study program to report again, maybe?
Yes. So what is required? Of course, what is required to document the fulfillment of a condition heavily depends on the condition. And what we do is the additional documentation should focus on the implemented improvement and provide the evidence for that improvement. But that does not mean a full SER again. There are some conditions that sometimes are very easy to address. Some others sometimes might take a little bit longer, and that way also the time period, it can be very different. If the experts find out that a certain, let's give an example. Your university does not at this point in time use a diploma supplement, okay? So one of the conditions could be there needs to be a diploma supplement. And what the experts want to do is they want to see it. So fulfillment of the condition would mean you will have to sit down and draft a diploma supplement that fulfills the requirements, and you deliver that. And that's already the fulfillment of the condition. The experts see it's there now. It could also be that the experts, when we look at the different aspects and qualification goals, intended learning outcomes, you might have qualification outcomes that are not so field specific, but for example, they could be more like on the general level. For example, the soft skills. You define that you also want to have your graduates a certain level of soft skills. They should be able to discuss certain issues. They should be able to present different aspects. And in all the course descriptions that you would have, that would not be visible. So, I mean, you would say on the program level, we want them to have the soft skills, but none of your courses would contribute to the soft skills. So one of the conditions could be that this representation of these qualifications must be visible in the learning outcomes of the course descriptions as well. So how do you fulfill that condition is you basically sit down and say, how do we implement the soft skills representation in our course descriptions as well? You update the course descriptions, and what you deliver then is the updated course descriptions. So it really depends on the nature of the condition, what you then do. And the time span that is defined is, from our end, it's no more than 12 months. That does not mean that if after 4 months you have already done everything, you just share the documents with us, we forward that to the experts, and then we take it back to our commission to have a decision on the fulfillment of the conditions. So we try to keep it flexible because we really believe it depends on the nature of the conditions. The good thing is no conditions will ever tell you exactly which way you have to go. The conditions will always tell you there is a shortcoming that you have to work on, leaving a high level of flexibility of how you intend to address that with you. Because we believe that we cannot prescribe exactly which path you have to go. We can tell you, and this is what the condition will do, where a certain standard is not met yet, and what generally we want to see. But if that means add additional courses, update courses, we leave a certain flexibility because it needs to be your solution to a problem. It cannot be the AQAS solution. We cannot come up with the solutions. But we can assist you in finding your own solutions because you have ownership of the program.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pak Ronny. Next questions from Bu Indah. Its cluster consists of 2 or 3 programs. Would you please suggest how should we arrange the SER, and should it be arranged individually for each program or combined in one document for all programs in one cluster? That is also exactly my question, actually. Yes, please, Pak Ronny.
Yes, I think so. The answer is, part of the answer is simple. One procedure means we have one self-evaluation report that covers all programs. And that means we do not have separate SERs, but we have one SER. So, and that goes back to what I was presenting a little bit earlier, when we had the structure of an SER, and an example of that on the screen. Because that basically means, of course, we need to find the marriage of different programs in one self-evaluation report. And that means we have in one report, we have some chapters that are common, because we only can put programs in clusters that have a certain proximity in the field. So we will never review a program of mathematics and the program of liberal arts in the same cluster, because you have 100% different staff, you have 100% different teaching approaches, and you basically also have different philosophies of teaching sometimes in that. But for example, if we do math and physics, there is a certain proximity in the academic fields. Sometimes even there is overlap in staff. So that could be reviewed in one cluster together. And that means we have clearly in one self-evaluation report the chapters on curriculum, they will be individual. There is chapter curriculum, and then you will have subchapter 1, mathematics, subchapter 2, physics. But then when it comes to the description of quality assurance, probably because it's in the same faculty, you will have the same structures, you will have the same procedures. The examples will be a bit different, so that can be dealt with. But generally, you can put that in one chapter. And this is when you later on in the recording see that there were 2 slides, and I will also share with you the presentation. And there is an example for a self-evaluation report structure, and there you would see that how to put that together. It takes a little bit of discussion internally, of course, like what is a good structure, where do we have to differentiate, but the good thing is you only have to do that once. Public information, for example, usually is comparable references. Student support mechanisms usually are the same. And that means that you only have to document certain things once and not like 3 different times. So there are synergies, while of course you have to sit down before and then see what is the structure. And if you need help for that, when you have come up with your first structure and you think that this could work, we can also have a quick session and see, do we also from our end believe that this could work? The key is it needs to represent the achievement of the standards for each student, for each program. I hope that helped a little bit to clarify.
Yes, thank you. Although I do still have some questions in my mind, but I think I'll continue with these questions listed in the chat first, and then I'll come back to that later on. Questions from Putri Mulyaningsih. Is there any link that provide description of European Qualification Framework and ECTS? That's what she asked for. Do you know that there is a link?
Yes, of course there is, because I mean that does not come from AQAS, but there is from the European Commission. There is introduction. There is whole websites talking, and there is for the European Qualifications Framework. It's a huge document explaining all the process. It's on the website of the European Commission. If you don't immediately find it, let me know, and I will be happy to Google to share the link with you. But that's the Commission has these documents because these are very, very central documents of the Bologna process.
Okay. Move on to questions from Bimo, Pak Bimo. In the context of organization and feasibility of offering a course, AQAS asked the study program to design it a committee that is responsible for this. Is this a quality assurance committee from outside the study program or from internal side? This is from criteria 3.4.
Yes. So I'm just reading the question. Yes. There are different ways how you can approach that, and one of them would be a committee. The key question, what we want to see is where is the responsibility? And one thing to look at that could be a committee. Sometimes that responsibility also lies with the dean, and then the dean is in the end responsible, but you have a subcommittee that supports the dean with that. That usually is a very internal approach, because that deals with how do you organize your study program. I've seen this task also being dealt with in larger committees where you also have outside participation, but I've also seen that in that you have a vice dean, for example, or the dean being responsible for that, because that is really the question of organization and feasibility of the curriculum. And that means, like, how do you coordinate that courses don't overlap? Like if you have certain courses that are not elective but that are compulsory in a certain semester, you have to assure that the compulsory courses in a certain semester do not happen at exactly the same time, so that somebody who's in the second semester can take all the compulsory courses of the second semester in the same semester. And if these courses would overlap time-wise, the student would have a problem because it's no longer feasible. And the question is, how do you assure that? And that could be a committee. That could also be the responsibility of individuals, but usually this is the feasibility aspect is more an internal thing for sure.
Okay, thank you. And there's also a request from Pak Agustono to explain again about the learning resources and student support, especially the support mechanisms. Thank you.
Yes. So student support mechanisms. Let me just see because probably this is the very quick one. If I take that on the screen for a second, I hope you should see that. Because this is the learning resources and student support. So what we see here is the whole resources. That's self-explanatory, and no, it's not, but that this is easier to address. These are the resources relevant for the program. Do you need particular labs? What is the library? Library, very important here. Nowadays, it's much more all virtual, particularly in times when students use online resources. The question of databases, how is availability here? The student support is how do you support students in the whole, also academic and non-academic aspects. That means, how do students learn about the requirements before they want to enter? What are the offers that you have there? Then you might have students with special needs. That's usually a very big part of student support mechanisms. Like students who have, who have special needs students, like, do you have compensation mechanisms for students with certain disabilities, with certain special needs situation? Sometimes you have students who fall sick for a longer time. Do you have support mechanisms that they can take a break and then they come back? Students who have relatives who they have to support, and for that reason sometimes do require a little bit of a different schedule. That also includes like, if there are certain fees that need to be paid, how are students supported there? So all the things that are available for students that support them in achieving the qualification, and that means like mastering the academic requirements, but also the non-academic requirements. That is something, psychological support. Some universities also provide medical support to students that immediately becomes available once a student is enrolled. These are all aspects that could be explained there. I hope that is helpful.
Yeah, and then also one questions from Bu Indah. Could we have example of submitted, and maybe I can add succeeded SER that already approved by AQAS accreditation?
Yes. So the challenge here is that the self-evaluation report is not an AQAS document. The self-evaluation report always remains a document that is yours from the university. So this is something that from our end we also do not publish, so we cannot easily share that document from another university, because of course it also contains sometimes a little bit of confidential information. Some universities explain like what is the finances behind it, what are the resources. So we cannot so easily share self-evaluation reports. What I do, what I will for sure check is we have, I think, prepared like one chapter out of such a self-evaluation report, where we have erased a couple of confidential information, but that helps you understand usually what is a bit of the style of what is expected there. Because I totally understand it's not what we do every day. On the other hand, I also believe, and that's the beauty of it, the self-evaluation reports of different universities sometimes have very different styles. And that is a very good way for experts to understand what is the style of that one university. How do they present themselves? What is their way of talking about themselves, of really self-assessing the faculty or the program. So I always say do it your way, but of course I will have a look to that you get some inspiration, and because it's about feeling comfortable with what you deliver.
Yes, please. That would be great, Pak Ronny, so that we can see whether what we have written in the SER is actually also something that AQAS expected. So that would be great if we have some example, of course, with all the amendment or hiding all the confidential information. Thank you so much. I didn't see any more questions. But if I may, I would like to continue with the question with regard to the SER report itself, whether it should be combined with one cluster, or it should be different in its cluster. Because I heard, if I'm not mistaken, you mentioned that if in one faculty, then it can be only one document of SER with the different programs. But in the 11 Maret University, especially for the first batch that we're going to apply for this June, we have 2 clusters. And the first cluster is from the accountant educations, and then bachelor management, and then also so this is not coming from the first from the same faculty. Is that okay to put it, to combine it together? Maybe the quality assurance in its faculty is different because they are
Yes.
not in the same faculty.
Yes, so if that is not a problem. I would be very surprised if what happens in the one faculty is fundamentally different from the other. But of course, if you believe that there's differences, you just add like 2 different subchapters in there, because the one subchapter is relevant for the one for the programs coming from one faculty, and the other is coming from the other. But particularly in quality assurance, sometimes you also have, there are certain similarities. Sometimes the committees are called a bit different. To a certain extent, I would also probably there are university-wide regulations that some things that have to be done, and that could be explained there. But this is not a problem if this comes from 2 different faculties. And then you just have 2 subchapters there, and one is like QA for these programs, and the second subchapter is for quality assurance procedures for that for the other program.
Okay, so 1 document per cluster or 1 document per university?
1 document per cluster, because we look at, because the cluster means that we do have like also different expert groups, because the experts group come for the clusters.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions from the participants? Because we have the expert here, so it is really a perfect timing to ask questions, because at this moment there are 5 study programs that try their best to write a SER of AQAS. Is there any more questions? Oh, there's one more questions in the chat box from Ibu Siswandari. Pak Ronny, would you please tell us what is the most important information that should be explained in the section of quality assurance for its study program?
Yeah, that is well, it's quality assurance is a wide field, but in I mean, we're doing a program review, so the focus, and I think that's important, the focus is not so much on the policies. The focus is how do you learn about your own program? So how do you check if you achieve? So how do you know if what you do is fit for purpose, and if you learn something, how does that lead to adjustments? So and what helps experts usually understand is the specific examples. So let me give you an example. You run the program for, let's talk about accounting, because that maybe helps. If you run an accounting program and your graduates usually are quite successful in the market, and then there is a meeting that you have with professional bodies from accounting, and they feedback, well, your graduates do quite well. There is a certain area where we believe that your graduates, they don't know about this, and they really need this in our field. And that's a stakeholder voice that you have as part of your, is it a round table or whatever, however that you have, you call the structure. Advisory boards sometimes are used. So the labor market tells you there is a qualification that your graduates do not bring, and we believe it is there. The question is, what do you make of it? Like, do you immediately say, oh, if the labor market tells us that this is what is needed, we implement it? or like how did that go, and how did you discuss that internally, and to what adjustment did it lead? That would be a very practical thing that experts would really want to understand. A very classical one, of course, is the evaluation of courses. So you give a course, like how do students provide feedback? Usually that works still very well. Students provide feedback with online surveys or sometimes paper-based, so nowadays probably all online. But then the question is, what happens to that? If the students tell you, we face this issue, what happens to that? Is there any circle? Is there any cycle how you take that feedback and how you implement that feedback and discuss it? Sometimes as a result of the discussion, it could also be things stay as it is, because it is a known challenge for accounting that in a certain field, students always struggle this. This is the hard course, and it's always been a hard course. And there is little we can do about it. And then also the question, how do students learn what happened to their feedback? So this is all about basically the different shades of the PDCA cycle. How do you plan what you're doing? How do you do what you're doing? How do you check? And then how do you act with that? I think this is the core. And in our guidelines, we give a couple of examples what you could do to demonstrate that. And my encouragement would be, do not focus so much on the policies, but focus on the particular examples, because that helps experts understand how you put your policies in practice. And we're reviewing really the quality assurance relevant for that program and not the quality assurance mechanism itself. I hope that sheds some light. I'm not sure if that didn't answer your question or I took it the wrong way. Let me know in the chat.
Thank you, Pak Ronny. As Pak Ronny said, maybe if the participants think that Pak Ronny has not answered the questions that you asked, you could also ask further questions or follow-up questions relating to your questions. Pak Ronny, I don't see any questions. Maybe if we still have like 15 minutes more. Maybe if you would like to add something, like for example, in your presentation that haven't been presented, maybe you could add, for example, the appendixes. What are the appendixes needed in the first criteria? Oh, I think you already mentioned for the third criteria. Maybe for the fourth, or the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh. I mean, if you have it in your presentation.
Yes. So and maybe before I do that, if we have the time, probably that's something I could say that is not on the slides.
Yes.
I think what is the one thing is, the procedure is a procedure that of course aims to demonstrate the achievement of certain standards. That is core. That is what accreditation is. At the same time, we try to design our procedure in a way that we support enhancement. And that also means we do not, the document is called self-evaluation report for a very good reason. It encourages a certain self-evaluation. And in the process of doing that self-evaluation report, usually it happens that you recognize that some things probably might still need to be discussed, because it very often happens that you have the one member of the faculty who does it the one way, following the assumption we all do it this way. And now, because you have to document what you're doing, you recognize, oh, we do it in a very different way. And that is maybe a moment where you want to sit together and say, do we want to, is it good the one way? Is it better the other? Do we keep the diversity because we believe that is a strength? So in that self-evaluation process, usually many things happen. And that is a very positive thing already, because it gives you also the chance of openly learning about your own, you self-evaluate. And in a self-evaluation, very rarely the outcome is everything is perfect. And if you recognize you have certain things where you say that still lies ahead of us, you can use that chance also to reflect on that in your self-evaluation report, because that will help the experts also support you in that enhancement process. So, for example, and I give a very neutral example, the whole topic of workload and how do we assess how many hours students work. In all my years of working for AQAS, I do believe I have never seen a perfect way to do that. Because whatever you do to deal with student workload, there are strengths here, there are weaknesses there. So there is no perfect solution. So every university, every faculty, they have their way to deal with it, and that's the key. That's what you can represent. And if in your self-evaluation report you figure out you have a shortcoming of a certain thing, you can also be transparent about it, because we're not looking at window dressing. As I said earlier, if you present experts a picture where you say everything is perfect, they will really start wondering, it's like, why is everything so perfect at this university, but not at mine? So the experts know the challenges from the field. If you ask an expert for accounting, if you ask a professor of accounting, the professor will be able to tell you, these are the courses that students traditionally struggle with, because this is challenging for all students. If in your university the numbers are wonderful and perfect in these courses, the experts will start digging deeper and say, why is everything so perfect there? What can I learn from them? So take that chance of creating an opportunity for a peer discussion. And if there are aspects where you believe in your self-evaluation, you figure out you're not perfect, you have an idea of how you want to work on that, you can be open about it. It does not harm the process. To the contrary, it encourages the experts to have that discussion about these aspects with you, and that is the enhancement of accreditation. We do not come and tick all the boxes and say you're fine, you're set, you're good, you can go. We do believe that academia is a constant process of taking things further, of having to change because the world outside changes, and accreditation is a wonderful opportunity to have a well-structured peer dialogue. And your self-evaluation report is it's your business card, it's your invitation for that. So don't shy out if you believe at a certain point you're not 100% there to cover it up. So that's the general part. And now to the annexes. I think generally, I mean, there are a couple of core annexes that are very important, and that is, of course, the course descriptions. This is the course handbook. Usually, it's there. Sometimes you have the very complex syllabi, and what we also provide is we provide a template for these course descriptions. Again, you do not have to use that template. If the key information of that template are in your syllabi anyway, you don't have to copy paste and make adjustments. But what for sure we want to have for each of the courses is, what are the course learning outcomes? What is the expected workload? What are the credit points? What are the teaching methods? What are the assessment methods? And how often is this course offered? So that's the course handbook. It's really a key document because we need to assess the outcomes. A second key document is, and it depends on the culture, is the examination regulations. So basically the regulations that you have that cover the program, that basically say these are the regulations that we have. Sometimes this is a very central document because you have undergraduate or graduate regulations that are the same for the faculty. Sometimes you have very specific parts. So this is the regulation part, exam regulations. The third part, very important, is for the chapter of teaching staff. This is the annex that covers the academic short CVs of the teaching staff. where basically we want to see, because the teaching staff criterion, it has the quantitative part. So do you have enough teaching staff to deal with a number of students that you're teaching? And of course, it has the qualitative approach, and that also means do you have the rightly qualified professors? And that means we need to have that annexes. And again, I think this is also very important to say, accreditation with AQAS does not mean we do not make an individual assessment on the qualifications of an individual teacher. We do not do that. We take a picture and we look at the program, and that basically means if you have, and I take an example from another faculty, if you have a program that deals with biochemistry, we would expect that you have professors not only in the field of biology or in the field of chemistry, but you would need the right mix of professors to teach that program. So that's why this is the qualitative thing. Of course, probably we would have an issue if you are teaching a master's or a bachelor or a PhD level, and you do not have people who have master's or PhD themselves. So that is what we're looking. It's not the individual teacher qualification that we're interested in, and we also do not make an individual assessment of teaching. So even once we are on site, we do not visit a class to assess the teaching of an individual teacher. That's not our job. That's the job of the university. We look at the program quality. And then, and maybe that is something indeed, I take, Erna, your inspiration and see if my slides tell me something that did not come to my mind. In the slides, yes. So I think the teaching staff we already covered, the short CVs of all teaching staff, that's really a core. For the, yes, of course, for admission, that is sometimes if you have the admission regulations, you will have that in a document. The diploma supplement, of course, is a very important document. So what do graduates receive upon completion of the program? And then this is not so predefined, because that can be very different. For that is evidence on feasibility. So these are the numbers that I was talking beforehand, like completion rates, dropout rates. Again, numbers do not tell you anything about the reality of the program. If, for example, you have a program with relatively high dropout rates, that is not necessarily a big problem if you know why students drop out. Sometimes students drop out because of very, very non-academic reasons. There are economic reasons students sometimes are faced with, and that leads them to a discontinuation of their studies. If that is the case, and you basically follow up on your dropouts and know, yes, this student, I mean, it was an A student, but unfortunately, there was a change in life circumstances, and now he needs to earn money. That's why he can't follow up or can't continue with the program. Then this is not an issue for the program. That's a program. That's an issue for the surrounding economic situation of your students, probably. Let me just check while we're doing that. Exactly, I think the examination regulations is what we already discussed. And for the procedure for quality assurance, again, the QA policies, where usually you would have documented. The evidence is the really interesting part. This is the examples of changes that you have implemented that I was talking about before. The question here is a little bit, how do you create evidence on that? For example, if you have advisory boards, maybe you have minutes of these advisory boards where you can say, this is the input that came, and then you deliver the evidence through that. One issue that you could have here in the annex is very often it's the question of language. I think that's fair to say, because if you do run an advisory board not in English language, probably also the minutes of that will not be in English. So the good thing is, for every cluster, for every procedure that we do, is we have a member in the panel who should be able to speak the local language. Because otherwise you would have to translate it all, and there would be lots of energy and resources invested in just translating. And that is not the purpose of the exercise. We will need a translation of the key and core annexes. These are the course descriptions, examination regulations, and the CVs of the teaching staff, the academic CVs. These are core evidences. But for everything that are the smaller cases like minutes, etc., we will be able to deal with that. Probably in your self-evaluation report, you will be able to say, as explained or evidenced in the attached minutes, this and this is what happened in that meeting, and then you provide the evidence. And if the evidence is not in English language, we will make use of the expert who knows the language and say, does that document really say that? I think that should be the key. Let me just say, for the teaching stuff, we have that. And yes, information on learning resources. I think this is sometimes your library or your database. You have a list of databases that proves what is available. And that should be the key for the required annexes. I hope that Erna, did that clarify a little bit on what is needed for the evidences?
Yes, I think so, but I do have questions but we are very happy, at least me, very happy that not everything should be translated into English, because it will be really a lot of works. Even with especially with the course plan, for example, then could we just pick one or two or three of the course plans should be translated in English, or maybe not at all, because you already have the student handbook in English, or the course handbook in English. And what about the CV of the teaching staff? Do you have the template for that, or we can also create the same, or the similar CV for all the teaching staffs of our
Yes.
university?
To that end, I would say you can use. I mean, it should be the same format, but that could be whatever. I mean, that can be your. We're very flexible on that end. I mean, we need to know what are the qualifications, and usually it's also good to know a little bit of what were the latest research topics. But we don't use a specific template for that. We do have in our guidelines, we do have a table that is very helpful, that is to get an overview, but we do usually know that I mean, some universities put all the academic CVs on their website anyway, so you have a certain format that you already use, and then it's easiest to reuse this format indeed. And for this, I mean, the key about the translation of the courses, it depends a little bit on what is in your student handbook. If in your student handbook every course is described in detail, saying in your student handbook the course is described with the course learning outcomes, the course content, the connected workload, the assessment methods, and the frequency and the teaching method, then your student handbook already addresses that. But if sometimes student handbooks just give like three lines about what happens in the course, and that is more process oriented than outcome oriented, then probably this does not solve the issue, because the key is exactly what I mentioned: learning outcomes of the course, content of the course, workload / credit hours for the course, teaching method, and assessment method.
So in that case, if the student handbook are not complete as AQAS requested, so then we have to translate the course plan, each of them, right?
Yes, probably. And again, and that depends a little bit. I would encourage, we would have to look at it. Sometimes course plans cover like what is like session per session. We don't want that level of detail. Everything that we would ask about a course, you should be able to fit in one, maximum 2 pages, because you have for every, I mean, you have probably predefined what are the course learning outcomes that usually are no more than 3 or 4 lines. You have a description of the content, and the rest usually are just very short information. What's the assessment method? What is the credit hours? So we do not need many pages per course. We really don't need that. So if your syllabi, if your course plan is very detailed, then look at the template that we provide for the course plans. What are the information that is in there? And then you can really reduce it down, because there is no added value of translating 5 or 6 pages for a certain course. That is not that is too much work for the exercise.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Pak Ronny. One more request. Can we have the presentation, please?
Of course. Okay. I will share that right after that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think, is there any more questions for Pak Ronny? I don't think that there is any. So maybe after Pak Ronny sharing the presentation, we can close the session. We would like to thank you very much, Pak Ronny, for your explanation. I think all of us will have a lot of works to do ahead before the submission deadline in June. Hopefully, we can fulfill that deadline.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for yeah, thank you for inviting. I mean, this is if you navigate the process. I mean, we do use these deadlines in order to make sure that we can also assure a good quality of the process. If sometimes there is a day or extra needed, all we need is a heads up so that we can navigate and we know where we are. The key I would really encourage is do and produce a document that you think represents you. And if, I mean, this is the key, because it's the document that you produce is what the experts will see and will use to understand what you're doing. So it should really be your document. It should be your self-evaluation report. And if you on the way recognize you need extra time here or there, we need to navigate, because in the end, it is the key to have a good report that you're proud of. And not to meet the deadline and then go with something that is only half ready, and because then we will have the problems and the challenges along the way, because experts will not understand, and that is something that we should try to avoid. So the quality here is also the key. Perfect. Yeah, if there are
yes, thank you.
Yes, yes, I will. Probably I can just. I will just copy that email, because usually once the session is done, it's
going to it's gone forever.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can share the I can share the document to the participants later on.
Yes, perfect, wonderful. Great. So it seems that,
yes,
we've covered all the questions.
Yes, hopefully. And the point is, if I'm not mistaken from your presentation, and then since it is self-evaluation report, then we have to be honest on what we have. Even if maybe there's a weak point of our study programs, we have also to be open with that. So it doesn't need to be perfect, and then we have to arrange for everything before the site visit, right? So to be honest, but we also can have like a kind of evaluation on what we were going to do in the future to, to bridge the gap that we don't have yet.
Absolutely. I mean, in the guidelines, you see that there are many sub-points that we call them indicators. You do not have to fulfill every indicator to meet a standard, because there is diversity and there is different approaches. And some of the indicators you might really think, in our system, we don't need that. And that is not a bad thing. So you do not have to meet all the indicators in order to meet the standards, because we take the more holistic approach to all these indicators and see, is the standard met? And one way to meet the standards is to work with the indicators. And the best thing, if you recognize you do have a certain shortcoming, you're not fully there, the best way is to present that you have a plan for that. Because the one thing is, what happens in a site visit is sometimes the experts really wonder, why does the faculty not know about this? This is so obvious. And then the experts are really careful, is like, but why don't they know about it? It's so obvious. The way it's written there, it's very clear. And then they wonder, what about this? The other end is, if you basically say, we think this is the reality, we're not very happy with that because we believe it could be much better, or it could be in a different way. It's about evolution, not revolution. And we have had different approaches to that, and we're still in the process of figuring out. Then the discussion with the experts will be, I think you have a very interesting idea there, or, well, I think what you have planned there, you might be even a bit more go to this direction or that direction. So you basically, you also give a little bit of a direction of the discussion with what it is, and don't window dress. It would not be super helpful, particularly for you, because I mean, if you window dress, you will not benefit from that whole exercise, and it is a lot of work indeed, as you have pointed out. It's a lot of work. Then we should find a way to use that work to your benefit. I think that's the key.
Okay, that is really great. So we have 3 minutes left, but I would maybe it's better to close the session, because we are in the middle of fasting month, Pak Ronny. So, and it's,
I know.
Yeah, in the next half an hour that for the Muslims will have to break their fast. So I think it's wise for us to close the session. So thank you very much again, Pak Ronny, for your time and for your explanations. And we do hope that we can, learn something from this session, and then put that in our self-evaluation report. Thank you very much also for all the questions from the participants and comments, as well as answer from Pak Ronny. It has been a fruitful discussion, and we were very grateful with the enthusiasms of the participants toward the session. I do hope that this session will provide a clear picture for the team of the study program, so the task force in preparing the AQAS International Accreditation. Thank you very much, and enjoy your evening, and for Pak Ronny, enjoy your afternoon. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very